In this part, I'm going to explain TestMonitor's approach to test management using the 6 stages of testing. In the previous video, we did a little introduction. In this video, we're going to dive into the fundamentals of TestMonitor. In the next videos, we're going to put theory into practice by showing you how to use TestMonitor like a pro. TestMonitor is built around the 6 stages, so I start off with telling you more about them and why they are so important. For each stage, I will discuss the definitions, their reason for existence, and some examples. Getting to know the theory behind TestMonitor helps you to use the app in its full potential. The 6 stages can be represented as an iterative process. You run by them one by one, and once you've reached the last stage, you'll restart the cycle by going to stage 1 again. Each new iteration allows you to refine your testing process, taking into account any lessons learned and dealing with any changes that happen frequently in a test project. Let's start with stage 1. The first stage is to determine what quality means for you and everyone involved by specifying them as requirements. This is perhaps the most important stage in the circle. When you don't know which requirements the system should meet, there's not much use for organizing a test. I know, this sounds strange, but in practice we see many customers who start designing their test cases without even having a single thought about their requirements in advance. What are requirements? Defining requirements involves writing down what is expected from the software. You start by writing down all the expectations of the various stakeholders and make a complete set of these requirements. Why are clearly defined requirements so important? First of all, because they provide consensus on the expectations of all stakeholders. With these expectations written down, you can set clear goals for your project and avoid discussions afterwards. And with clear expectations, it gives direction towards what needs to be tested. Knowing what needs to be tested provides structure and a scope when starting to design test cases. When reporting back to stakeholders, passing and failing requirements provide a simple means of telling your project's status without getting into all kinds of testing details. And because they are free of testing or IT terms, you report and communicate in plain English and understandable language for all the stakeholders. Requirements can be approached from different angles. Here, you see 4 examples of different requirement types. It should provide a means to manage users is an example of a functional requirement. The login page should load within 3 seconds is an example of a non-functional requirement. As a user, I should be able to manage my own tasks is an example of a user requirement. Purchasing process is an example of a business requirement. Next to defining requirements, you can define risks for a risk-based testing approach. Risks describe events that, if they occur, affect your project objectives. Writing down risks can also offer some distinct advantages. It's important to realize that time and money aren't infinite. Testing everything is impossible. You have to resort to prioritizing test cases. For example, you can select the test cases with a high risk factor. And, like requirements, they can be used to group related test cases, test results, and issues for risk-based reporting and communication. Here, you see some examples of risks. They come in all sorts and forms. Some of them deal with data integrity, others with application security, and some can pose a financial risk to you or your organization. In a way, risks are the exact opposite of requirements. You want to make sure each requirement is met, and at the same time, you want to make sure that each risk is avoided. This concludes the first stage of TestMonitor. Now, let's head over to the second stage. This is the design stage, where you design test cases and test suites. What are test cases? A test case defines a series of actions which outcome should match an expected result. The purpose of running these test cases is to verify whether a specific function or feature works as intended. But what does a test case actually look like? A test case consists of several elements. First, a test case needs a name. A good naming scheme helps you to easily identify test cases. With a small amount of test cases, it's not that important. But when you're facing hundreds of test cases, you still need to be able to distinguish them. Second, a test case has input variables, like preconditions, test data, and attachments. The preconditions for a test case include the state a system and its environment must have before a specific test can be run. In other words, preconditions specify the setup needed for a test case to be executed successfully. Test data is the data that is used specific to execute this test case. This can be some login data, an invoice number, or contact information, for example. and attachments can be useful for the tester to provide more context. For example, when matching the included invoice PDF with an actual invoice from your test. Third, there's the action section. Here, you define the test instructions or test steps. The test instructions tell step by step what the tester should do in order to test the actual process. And the fourth section describes the output, the expected result of the test case. It's up to the tester to compare this with the actual result, and when it differs, it should be registered as a failed result in TestMonitor. Why do you actually need test cases? This may seem like a no-brainer, but it is crucial when it comes to structured testing. If your test cases are not well designed, you will suffer from this throughout your entire testing process. Take your time writing test cases. You'll end up saving a lot of time in the long run. Test cases are important because they provide content to the requirements, provide structure and direction to the testers. The testers are guided in their actions every step of the way, while also being provided with additional information to enable proper verification. Test cases provide instructions on how and what they are testing. They avoid interpretation and misconceptions. And it provides a test manager with perspective, allowing a library of reusable test cases and scenarios to be created. Here's an example of a simple test case. It comes with a unique identifier, a descriptive name, and detailed instructions. There's no use logging in without an account, so that's a precondition. Test data is used to include the email address that's required for logging in. And the expected result is that you are in the logged in state after following the instructions. It may seem obvious, but in many occasions you perform extra verifications, which you should include in your expected result. Test suites are a way to group similar test cases. You can compare them with files and folders on your computer. Once you've got too many files, it may be wise to group them in a folder. Organizing test cases becomes a necessity once you reach a certain number of test cases. With only 10 test cases, things are still very manageable. Once you reach 1,000 test cases, things will be different. It becomes more difficult to manage them, plan them, and track results. The solution is to group them into suites. As for naming test suites, there is no right or wrong. It all depends on your preference. By grouping them, you'll also benefit from the filters that are presented in later stages. You can more easily assign test cases using the test suite filter, for example. You can name your test suites in different ways. For example, by test type, for example, functional and non-functional, or by application, or by process, for example, purchasing and sales, or by test scenario, etc. This was the design stage. Are you all holding up? Great, let's head over to the next one. Let's start with planning test runs and milestones. In TestMonitor, milestones are just what you expect them to be, checkpoints in your project. They are a way of breaking down your project into reachable goals. Why should you use milestones? So, like I said, milestones provide guidance within your project because they function as checkpoints on your project timeline. They provide an easy way to report and communicate on all test results and issues in line with the project cadence. And just like test suites, they provide a way of grouping test runs. I'll talk about this in a second. Milestones represent important points in time, like a pre-test or an acceptance test. When you are working agile, every sprint can be a milestone. I already mentioned test runs a second ago. A milestone contains one or more test runs. They combine information of what should be tested, by whom, at what place, and at what time and date. So why use test runs? Because it allows everyone to know who should run the test, which cases should be covered, and at what point of time. In addition, it reduces the complexity of planning, as it is easier to plan 10 test cases with 2 testers rather than planning 1,000 plus test cases with 100 testers. Furthermore, with each test run planned, everyone knows the workload of every single tester. This can be important to know because of other work activities they might have planned. Test runs don't just give you a grip on the planning side, but also on the side of monitoring progress. And lastly, as already mentioned earlier, test runs can be easily reused, allowing the test manager to schedule complete retests with the touch of a button. There are endless examples of test runs, but the simplest is a series of test cases, for example TC1 and TC2, created in a certain order in which it has to be tested in one single test run, called login. This test run needs to be completed by Jason, John, and Maria at the end of the week. And again, here are some examples. You'll really get a knack at naming test runs when your test project is running. There's no right or wrong in naming test runs, it's just so that you can trace back its origin and know what the run is about. When the test runs are planned, we proceed with the next stage. This stage covers running tests. Running tests is an important stage in your testing project. It's where all your careful planning comes together. Testers are standing by, and your test cases are ready to run. Why actually running tests? That is a no-brainer. Without running tests, we won't get test results, and without those, we can't verify the expected result. After verification, the tester selects an outcome, the test result. The testers can add additional information, such as an attachment or screenshot. By completing test runs, progress is made in your software test project. In turn, this progress can be measured and used to project a time of completion. It also causes test cases to be covered, allowing you to see which areas of test application have been touched and which haven't. The testers have already given their test results at this stage. Once the test results come pouring in, it's the job of the test manager to monitor the incoming results and decide what to do with the failed results. In tracking test results, test case and test run results can be reviewed. When you have many testers and many test cases, a large amount of data must be analyzed. We'll explain the filters later on in the Masterclass, but you'll definitely need them to do your analysis quickly and effectively. Why track test results? First, it provides you with a way of seeing what went right and what went wrong. In addition, you want to be able to view and assess failed test results in detail. You can drill down and use the provided filters to narrow down the data set to your liking. And you have insight into the progress at test case level, but also at test run level. For failed test results, you will have to determine whether an issue should be created or whether to link it to an existing issue. The test results were analyzed. This brings us to the last stage, resolving issues. What are issues? Issues, also called defects, are problems that cause an unexpected result. The issue is linked to the test result, with all the metadata provided by the testers during testing. The issue is then passed on to an owner, who is responsible for fixing the issue. Why should you use issue management? First, because the person responsible for the issue knows exactly what to solve. Issues provide context to the problem through the test results, additional information and attachments. This helps with troubleshooting and retesting. Related test results can be linked to the same issue to avoid duplication. The number of failed test results is often 2 to 3 times higher than the number of issues. Testers often notice the same problem several times. Collecting these test results before going to developers will improve efficiency. You can give each issue a status, category, impact, and priority. This makes it possible to better prioritize and manage the issues in a project. Furthermore, all stakeholders will have a clear picture of what has priority, what has been assigned to whom, what has been resolved, and what is ready for retest. All communication about the issues can take place in TestMonitor via issue comments. As a result, all communication is organized in one place and available to all those involved. Comments no longer get lost in the mail. After this last stage, things start over again. Are all requirements still okay? Perhaps they need a review. Next, any test cases that need tweaking. Perhaps a couple of new ones. Do we need to create new test runs for any that have been resolved? And so on. Make sure to stay in touch and subscribe. Please consider hitting the like button, subscribing to our channel, and enabling notifications for future video updates. Thanks for watching this video. Please watch the next parts to become a real TestMonitor expert.